Welcome back to LarryB YouTube channel. In today's class, we'll be learning how to make this beautiful gathered yoke corset dress. It's a corset dress that has some gathers around the cup area and also on the hem of the dress. A Basque dress, and it's really beautiful and simple to make. If this is something you like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you.
Okay, so registration for our online classes are ongoing. We have the beginners class, the intermediate, and the upgrade class. So I'll be leaving the details to the registration on the screen for you to see the numbers to call. So if you're interested in any of our classes, kindly contact us and we'll put you through how you can register for them.
Okay, so to draft this, I'm going to be drafting my regular basic bodice up to the hip line level, and then we're going to be adapting that bodice to our yoke corset dress. So the shoulder I'm working with is 15 inches divided by 2. It's going to give me 7.5. So you can see here on my starting point, I'm measuring 7.5. And then the neckline I'm working with for the front is 3 inches by 3 inches. And then on this shoulder point, I'm going to go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and then I'm going to connect that to my neck point to the 3 inches. Here also I'm going to connect my neckline. So I'm going to, from my starting point again, I'm going to measure my armhole. The armhole I'm working with is 9 inches. The waistline is, so the waist is 16 inches. So this is 16 inches, and then the hip line is 26 inches. So I'll make all of this into a straight line. So I have my lines. This is my armhole, this is my waistline, and the last line is the hip line. So the next thing now is to make my dart, and for that I'm going to need my bust span measurement, which is 8 inches divided by 2. That's 4 inches. So I'm going to mark the 4 inches here. So for my dart for the front, the dart stops around 1 inch below the bust point. So I'm just going to mark that, and my dart is going to stop around here. So here I'm going to mark out the 4 inches again, and then I'll make that into a straight line. So on the waistline, I'm going to take a dart of 1/2 inch each on the waistline, and then I'll connect that to my starting point, and then I'll also connect it to the lower bodice. So for the lower dart, you're going to go up by 2 inches from your hip line, and then you stop your dart there. Okay, so after this I'm going to connect this dart to my shoulder, and to do this I'm going to measure what I have left on my shoulder, and then I'm going to divide that by 2. I'm going to divide that into 2, and then I'll connect the dart to my bust point like this. Okay, so now I have my dart sorted. The next thing now is to start taking my circumference measurement. So on my armhole, I'm going to take my bust measurement, and the bust I'm working with is 42 inches. So 42 divided by 4 is going to give me 10.5. So I'm going to mark 10.5 inches here. For my waist, the waist I'm working with is 34 inches. 34 divided by 4 is going to give me 8.5 inches. So here I'm going to mark 8.5 inches. So I'm just going to take 3.5 inches here and then continue, so that I don't have any shortage from my dart. And then on the hip line, the hip I'm working with is 44 inches divided by 4 is going to give me 11 inches. So I'm going to add a seam allowance of 1.5 inches all around this, and then I'm going to connect it together. So next is to draw out my armhole line. So to draw the armhole line, I just measured what I have here. My shoulder 7.5 inches. I repeated it on my armhole line here, 7.5 inches, and then I made it into a straight line. So I'm going to find the midpoint of this line, which is here, and on the midpoint I'll go inwards by 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to take my curve and then connect these 3 points together. So once I have a connection, I'm going to draw out my armhole curve. So I have my curve like that. So the next thing now is to create my basque effect. So for your basque effect, depending on how you want it, how low you want it to be, you just add to your hip line. Remember, we stopped these bodies on the hip line. So on my hip line at the center fold area, I'm going to go down by 4 inches. You can do 5 inches, but don't do too much. So between 3 to 5 inches is fine. So I'm going to go down by 4 inches here, and then I'm going to connect from where my hip line stops here to my 4 inches diagonally using my ruler. Okay, so this is going to be my full body. So now I'm going to modify these bodies to form my corset yoke. So because this is a corset, I'm going to map out my underbust line. So because the yoke is going to stop on the underbust, I'm marking my underbust line, and then my underbust is 13.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark that here, and then I'm going to use my ruler to make it into a straight line. So you can actually contour your underbust if you want, or just leave it as it is like this. So now the next thing is to start drawing my curve for my yoke. Okay, so for the center front, on my armhole line, which is this line, I'm going to go down by 1/2 inch or 1 inch. So I'm just going to go down by 3/4 inch here. Okay, and then on that point I'm going to go inwards by 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch also. So that's the gap between the bust that you see on your corset. So here I'm just going inwards by 1/2 inch here, and then from this point now I'm going to use my curved ruler to connect it to my underbust area to form the first side of my curve. So here you can see this is my underbust and this is the line. So I can just make this line straight so that it will be obvious for you, and then using my curved ruler I'm going to connect it to where the line stops. So now the first part of my curve is done. Then I'm going to move to the other part. So to form the other part of the cup, remember we added allowance to this. This is my actual measurement. So because my cup is not going to enter into the allowance, I'm just going to draw out my actual measurement. So it's not compulsory for you to have allowance on your pattern, but I just like to have it so that I don't forget. So this is my actual measurement and this is the allowance. So now to know where to add this cup, the first thing I'm going to do is to also go down by 3/4 inch that I did here. So here I'm going to measure the same 3/4 inch here, and then I'm going to measure what I have between where my armhole line stops to this place. So you can see I'm measuring what I have here, and I have around 3 inches. Then I'm going to divide that by 2 to just be a guide for me, and then it stops here. So where it stops, you go down by the same 3/4 because it has to be on the same level with what I have here. And then using my curved ruler again, I'm going to connect it to my underbust. Okay. So this takes care of my second curve, and then I'm going to connect this also to form a straight line. So you make it also enter into your allowance. So this is all you need to do, and then we can cut this out. Okay, so before I cut it off, I have the back bodies drafted also already. I have my zipper allowance here. This is the shoulder point, this is my armhole, this is the armhole line, the waistline, and the hip line. And then also I have my dart here. So the same way I did the basque effects for the front, on here I'm just going to go down by 4 inches also for the back, and then I'm going to connect it to the side. So I'll just extend my zipper allowance here to the 4 inches. So I'm extending my zipper allowance, and then I'm just going to mark it straight up to here. So the connection is going to start from my center back, where my actual center back starts, all the way to the side, and then I'm going to add the same 1.5 inches allowance that I added for the front also on the side. This is what the back looks like after cutting it. So the next thing now is to create the yoke for the back. So for the yoke, it depends on how low you want it to be, but I want it to be on the same level with what I have in front. So to do this, I'm going to go down by 3/4 of an inch on the side from the armhole line, just like I did for the front. So that's where my yoke is going to stop on the side, and I'll mark that also on the allowance. And then for the center, or for the center back area, I'm going to go down by around 2 inches because I want it to have just like a slight V shape, 2 inches or 2.5 inches. So if I'm going for 2.5 inches, I'll have it here, and then I'm going to take my curved ruler and connect it like this. Okay, so I also make this to a straight line like this, and then I'll make also a straight line for my zipper allowance. So that is all I need to do. I'm just going to label this my back yoke. So now I'm going to cut this out. Okay, so the yoke is cut now for the back, and also for my front. I'm going to label this my yoke, and I'll also cut it out. So cut from here now, and then you just cut around your cup that you created. Stop here and then cut to your side. So this is the yoke for the front and also for the back. So for the front yoke, it has a gathers around the cup area. So to create these gathers, we need this volume, because what we have here is exactly what is going to fit into what we have on the lower bodies. So to have excess so that we can gather it, we're going to slash this line open. This line that we have here, we're going to slash it open by cutting through it, but I'm not going to cut completely on the shoulder. So I'm just cutting through it like this, and then I'll stop here, and then I'll spread it. So you can spread it as much as you want. You can spread with 1 inch, 2 inch, depending on how much gathers you want on that area. So I'm going to place another paper underneath it, and then I'm going to spread it with 3 inches like this. So I've slashed this opened now, and you can see the extra paper that I added underneath it, and then I opened it up by 3 inches like I said. If you want it more than this, you can add more to it. So these are my yoke, and then I'm going to set them aside and work on the lower bodies. So for the lower bodies, you can go ahead and just cut this directly on your fabric like this and hold your dart, but because I don't want to have that on my under my cup area, I'm just going to separate it. So I'm going to separate the waist on the waistline here. I'm going to cut it open and then separate it. So after separating it, I'm going to cut this dart open also, and then I'll close the dart. So this means by the time I'm cutting it on my fabric, I won't have to add that. I won't have to hold any dart on that area. Then I'll cut this separately, then I'll hold the dart. So the same thing that I've done for this front, I'm also going to repeat it for the back also. I'll open it here at the waist area. I'm going to separate it at the waistline here, and then I'm going to also close my dart for the back. So after doing this now, I'm going to go ahead and cut my pattern on my fabric. So I'm using an Ankara fabric for the lower bodies here, which is this, and then for the upper bodies I'm using a polished black fabric. So you can also use crepe, you can use chiffon, depending on what you want to get. So I'll go ahead now and cut all of this on my main fabric, and then I'll bring it back to show us. So I'm gonna have to cut this on my fabric. This is the lower part for the front and the back. So on the part here where I'm going to join it, I added 1/2 inch allowance and also where I'm joining my gathers on the hem, I also added 1/2 inch allowance with. I don't have any allowance on the side because I already have that on my pattern. So I cut out my fabric and my lining, as you can see, and then this is the upper part of the Ankara part. So here also I cut out my lining and my fabric. So for this front area, you put your fabric on fold when you're cutting the front, and then also I added my allowances where I'm going to have joining. And this is my yoke. So like I said, I'm using the black polish fabric for the yoke, and where I'm going to add it to the lower part also, I added 1/2 inch allowance, and also on the shoulder. So now the next thing is for me to start joining them. So the first one I'm going to join in this case is my front. So I'm going to join the front. I'm going to remove my pins, and then I'll gather the, remember we slashed this part open. So now I'm going to gather these 3 inches. I'll gather it back to fit into exactly what I have here. So I'm going to remove the pins that I have on this now, and then I'm going to run a gather stitch to the cup area only. So I'm going to gather it back to fit into what I have here, so that I can remove this excess that I have. So when I open it out, this is what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and run my gather stitch all around this. So I've gone ahead to run the gather stitch. I'm just going to pick it up now and then start to gather this, as you can see. So you can see my gathers. So I'm going to gather it back to my original size. So just dab it gently so that you won't cut your thread. Okay, so I've gone ahead to gather this now. The next thing is to pick my lower part now, and then I'm going to pin it to it before I go ahead to sew this. So now I'm going to place them against each other now, and then I'll pin it round. So I've gone ahead to pin this now, and if you turn it to the other side, you can see my pins here. So now I'll take it to the sewing machine and then stitch it. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew this, and this is what it looks like. So when you want to sew the corners, you can just notch it a bit so that it can relax well for you. So this is what it looks like on the inside, and this is it on the outer part. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to join the last one of the center front. So because before I do this, I have a dart here, so I'm going to go ahead and hold my dart, and then I'll join it. So I'm just going to notch the dart area. So I'm going to remove this now, and then I'll hold the dart there, and after holding the dart, I'm going to sew the lower part to the upper part. So the same thing, I'm going to hold the dart for this also, and then I'll take my lining for the upper one, for this, for the part with the cup. I'll also join the lining to the main fabric after holding my dart. Then I'll bring it back to show us how to turn it. Okay, so I've gone ahead to take in the darts, as you can see, and then I sew it to the waistline. So this is what it looks like on the outer part, and this is my lining. For my lining also, I took in my dart, and then I sewed the lower part to the upper part on the waistline. So now this is where the inside is looking like now. It's still rough, so I'm going to use this lining to cover it up. So this is my lining here. So this is what I want it to look like by the time I'm done. So now I'm just going to flip this now and then match everything together. So I'm going to match this part together like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and match the cup area also, and then I'll sew it. So by the time I sew it and flip it, I'll have something neat on this side. So also on this side, I'm going to also take it together and then sew this side close like this, so that it's going to be neat. But if you don't want to sew this side, you can also serge it when you're done. You can also do inseam finishing, so it depends on what you want to do. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and sew the cup area and then bring it back to show us what we have. So I'm going ahead to sew this now, and then I also sew it on this side by pushing the tiny that I have left with my yoke. aside. So now I'm going to turn it out. You can notch this curved area so that I can relax well for you. I'm going to turn it out so you can see it's neat on the side also, and then I'll take it to the ironing table and give it a very good press so that it can come out really nice. So this is what I have so far. This is what my inner part is looking like. You can see that it is now neat. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the outside. So I've gone ahead to iron this now. You can see what we have. So I'm going to set this aside. This is what it looks like on the inside. I'm going to set it aside now and then work on the back. So the back is quite simple, just like we did for the front. I'm going to hold my dart on this part to sew, and then I'm going to sew the lower part to the upper part after holding my dart, the lining and the main fabric separately, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew my back yoke also to this. So it's quite simple. I'll sew this to my back yoke, and then I'm still going to sew the front and back. I'm going to sew the lining and the main fabric separately, and then I'll use it to turn it out just like I did for the front. So this is the back. I can see it's in two pieces because the center back is slashed because of the zipper area. So now this is what the main fabric is looking like, and this is the lining that we're going to use to cover it. So to cover this now, you make sure that you cover the center back area also, because you're going to be fixing your lining there. So I'm just going to place it like this. This is what I want by the time I'm done. So to now sew it, I just need to flip it over like this and then match them against each other. Then after matching it against each other, I'm going to sew it on the yoke part, and also I'll sew it on the center back area and also on the side. Then I'm going to turn it through the hem. So I'll do this for the two of them, turn it, iron it, and then I'll bring it back so that I can continue. So I'm gonna head to iron this now, and you can see what it looks like. This is what the inside is looking like, and this is what it looks like on the outside. And you can see that by going down by 2.5 inches at the center back, it just gives us this V effect that we have here. So this is the other side for the back. This is the inside, and this is the outside. You can see they are all neat. So now the last thing to do now is to place my front bodice against my back bodice. Then I'm going to join it together on the shoulder. Then I'll join it also on the side with the allowance that I left. So after joining it on this side, you can go ahead and fix your zipper before we add our gathers to this. So I'm gonna head to join this on the shoulder and also on the side. So this is what we have. So the last thing now is to measure what we have on our hem, and then we use that to cut out the gather. So now I'll just take my tape rule now and then take it round like this. So now I have 23. I can just multiply this into 2 to get my front and back. So now I have 47. So to cut my fabric, I'm going to cut a fabric of 47 inches by 3. So I'm going to multiply this 47 inches by 3 inches to gain the length of my fabric. So it depends on how full you want it to be and the amount of fabric you have to work with. So 3 inches multiplying by 3 is fine for me, but if you have enough fabric, you can multiply by 4, and if you don't have enough, you can just multiply by 2 and then gather it. So the length of this fabric is what you have to complete this dress. Remember, when we're drafting it, we stopped at 26 inches for our drafting, which is the hip line. Then I went ahead to add extra 4 inches to get my Basque effect. So now this dress is actually, my short gown length is actually 40 inches. So now I have 30 inches here already, which means I have 10 inches left to complete this 40 inches. So I'm going to add same allowance of 1 inch to it, and that's going to give me 41. So if I deduct 41 from 30, I'm going to be left with 11 inches. So I'll get a fabric of 11 inches long, and then the width is going to be 47 inches by 3. Okay, so I've gone ahead to fix the gathers to it, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so you just need to iron this now. Fix your zipper to the back. This is is what the back looks like. You fix your zipper on the back, and then you hem the neckline with a bias, then fix a sleeve of your choice. So this is what we have. This is the full view of the dress. So now I'll take this to the mannequin so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what the dress is looking like now. This is the upper part, the yoke part, that has the small gathers that we have around the cup area, and this is what the lower part is looking like. I hope you enjoyed making this tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.